Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I am joined by Jan Morris. Jan and her husband decided to open a distillery on the peninsula, very close to a national park where there are very few people. And so I am eager to understand what led Jan to do this and how things have gone over the last 10 plus years that they've been operating this business. So Jan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Jan, my first question is, I'm curious, did you always know you wanted to be a business owner?
No, I was a speech pathologist for about 3 years. And then I became an attorney, and I did that for 25 years. And then during the Great Recession, I was laid off 1 month before I turned 60. And I applied for unemployment, and I ended up in this self-employment assistance program because the employment department of Washington State sent me a letter. I thought, oh, good, they think they sent me a letter accepting me into the program, and I thought, oh, good, they see how talented I am, or something. I don't know. I had to be interviewed, and then I get the letter and it said, you have been accepted in this program because we believe you are unemployable. So I guess 60 and an attorney, and during a recession, you're not going to get a job. So one of our sons was a brewer, and he seemed very happy owning a brewery. So I thought, well, I can do the grown-up version of brewing. I'll open a distillery. So at first, it was just going to be kind of something to keep me busy until my husband retired. And then it just grew and grew and grew. We were looking for a place. We lived in Seattle, and so we were looking for a place to have it there, but real estate was just out of the question. So we had a vacation home in Hoodsport, and there was a building available in the little town of Hoodsport. I mean, by little, there's no stoplight. There's only like 5 buildings on the side of the highway we're on. We're on Highway 101. And actually, everything that we did turned out lucky. We had no idea. Well, both of us, my husband was a structural engineer, and both of us had always just, somebody always paid us. We never had to figure out how to do things. And actually, I think it's keeping us really young, because now that we're in our mid 70s, and we have no plan. I mean, it's the only thing I regret is that I just didn't start a business earlier, for a lot of reasons. But yeah, if people are thinking of starting a business, don't wait till you're 60 to start younger. That's my advice.
Jan, there are so many things I want to dig into about your story. First of all, I love recovering attorneys that become business owners. You always have an interesting view of the risks you think you're taking on and how you approach them. So I want to get into that in a minute. But first, I want to understand, man, how did it feel to get that letter from the state and hear, oh, you're essentially unemployable? What did you even do at that point?
Well, at first I didn't know what to think. And then I decided, well, I'll just go with it and see what happens. And so I went into the self-employment assistance program, which at that time was very, very, very good in King County, or I don't know, Washington State, but it was an extremely good program. And they sent us I had to weekly attend a meeting with someone. And so 1 week I met with a real estate specialist who said, whatever you do when you start your business, get a space bigger than you possibly think you might need, which was super good advice. And I'm glad I followed that. And then we met with somebody who would help us with a business plan. And they just had a whole assortment of experts to help you start a business. It was really, really good. I don't think they do that anymore, but at the time I was lucky.
Yeah. So tell me more about this, Jan. first of all, starting a business after you turn 60, amazing. I want to hear more about that. But tell me from the lens of someone who has been trained as an attorney for 25 years. So your job is seeing the risk and all the things that other people are doing and helping them identify ways to work around that. When you thought about starting your own business at the age of 60, what were the thoughts that went through your head in terms of what you needed to navigate and think through?
I I think I'm one of those people who doesn't really think things through for myself as well as I should. I
So you
just kind
benefit
of
from
let
other
go.
people.
And at first it was going to be just sort of like a little hobby thing. And then luckily because I'm an attorney, all the paperwork to be legal was easy for me. So there have been parts where having been an attorney was super easy, but some of the things like I didn't, my sister, one of my sisters came up when I opened the distillery. Once we decided to be in Hoodsport and we opened up, my sister helped me. She'd always worked in retail, so I had absolutely zero idea of how to do anything. I mean, I'd never worked retail. I'd always had a professional job, and so I had no clue what I was doing. And I remember this was so terrible. I didn't, people would come in the shop and I'd think, oh, I should talk to them. What do I say? And my sister actually wrote down some questions for me, like, oh, where are you from? How is the drive? I mean, and now, of course, everything's really easy. I really enjoy talking to everybody. But just to think back then, how I had no clue what I was doing.
So you had no clue how to do retail. You had no clue how
Correct?
to distill.
Correct.
How did
Correct.
you, so you started a distillery with no experience distilling. How did you figure that part out?
Well, I took a 1 week class and they
Okay.
told us how to distill. Yeah. And then we bought, so we bought the building and then it took about a year to get it, all set up for the distillery. 'Cause part of its production, the basement's storage for the barrels, and then a big piece is the tasting room. And so it was, well, we just had no idea what we were doing. We just stumbled along and everything just turned out so lucky. I mean, we're lucky on Highway 101. We're right at the turnoff for the entrance to the Olympic National Park. So, I mean, the location couldn't be better. And like most driven businesses, we are very, very, very busy in the summer. And this time of year, you could go play kick the can out on 101.
Which is why
It's,
you're on vacation right now.
yes, exactly.
Okay. So you took a week-long course on distilling. How did you find this course?
I'm pretty sure it was through that self-employment assistance program. They sent me to, um, oh, I know. Yeah. And so it was the Small Business Administration. And there was a woman there who knew somebody who was running this course out at Moses Lake. And so I went out there and took the class.
So you drove out to Eastern Washington to get a little course in distilling.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, Jan, the first batch of whatever you made was not particularly amazing. Is that fair? Like, how many experiments did you have to run before you figured it out? Or is it just distilling alcohol is so easy, anyone can do it with a 1 week course?
Well, there's a lot of true in what you say. I mean, it's a mixed bag. So, you're not allowed legally to practice before you're fully licensed. So, keep in
Interesting.
mind, I'm carefully answering all of your questions. Um,
Because this is discoverable, is that what you're saying?
it's a felony if you do that. So,
Okay.
yeah. So we had when we started up. Yeah, it took a while for us to figure out what we were doing. So because our son was a brewer, he really helped us a lot. So he did a lot of the mash bill for us.
Okay.
And yeah, so we had his help, which was really great. And yeah, I mean, we've done yeah, well, I'd say most everything has turned out better than I thought it would. And actually, I have to say, after our first batch of whiskey had aged, I mean, we did a few that only aged a little bit and they weren't, but now they're aged about 4 years. We have one batch out that's aged 8 years. And some days I'm still I sample it and I think, wow, this really does taste like whiskey. It's pretty good. So yeah, we've been super lucky.
Well, and it sounds like you benefited from a son who had pretty, although it was a little bit tangential, it's pretty similar, right? In that you're taking it through a fermentation process that involves some of the same steps, just with some different materials.
Right, right. So when we first started, he had made some meads that we found in carboys in our basement in Seattle. So we took those out to Hoodsport and distilled them. And that's actually one of our main products now. We call it bee's knees. It's 80% honey, 20% fruit. And we use local fruit, local honey. And at first, it took some fine tuning to figure out how long to age it, what's the ideal. Um, and then it's just a unique product. It's pretty successful. And then we make some liqueurs from that are really tasty and very popular. So all that, and then we reuse our bee's knees barrels. This is another fortuitous thing. Then this is just kind of strange. We had one, so we're right on the highway. This guy comes by with his wife on motorcycles, and he stops in, and he he's really friendly, goes right back to the production area, and he sticks his hands in the grain and smells the grain and asks us a lot of questions. And it turns out he's a master distiller from Scotland, and his grandfather was a master distiller, and his father was, and he had worked at Lagavulin and all those really prestigious ones.
Yeah.
And then he became a good friend. He had the same sense of humor as us, and he'd come down and spend a weekend here and there with us and help us distill. I mean, how lucky could we be? And then at that time, I was writing a little magazine article, and I wrote a magazine article about him, and he got bored because he had moved. His wife was Canadian, and their deal was she was with him during their working career in Scotland, and then upon retirement, they were moving to British Columbia. And so he was retired, but he was looking for some consulting jobs. So I wrote about him, and that helped him get consulting jobs, and he helped us so much. So then he had the idea that we should age our whiskey in the bee's knees barrels. And so our whiskey, which actually is pretty popular, it has just a little honey and fruit from the barrel, and
Yeah.
it's a really nice whiskey. And then we make a bunch of other stuff. Well, our children say, Mom, Dad, you two have ADD. Can't you stop coming up with new products? You've got too many SKUs. So, but it's been, yeah, I don't know. It's been an amazing trip. And, in our lives, it's so interesting. And then when you reach retirement age, you're a long way away from it. I can tell by your picture, but
It's good lighting. I'm not as far as you'd think, but go ahead.
yeah. Okay. Well, as it turns out, it's kind of like going through puberty again when you hit retirement age. Everybody changes again. And some people, a lot of my friends, all they do is travel. And then there's a few of us that are like us and artist friends and other kind of creative people that really kind of we just can't seem to stop working. And I think it's because we're creating new things all the time and learning new things all the time. And or maybe we're addicted to work. I don't think we're addicted to work, but we, it's kind of interesting to watch all of us turn this retirement age and how the different approaches are. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you've
I
seen
think,
people just get the travel bug and travel around. Sounds like you wouldn't be happy with that because then you would not be doing something that's exercising that creativity. I'm curious though, you were an attorney for 25 years. You don't normally expect someone who's got the creativity bug to be in law. So how did that show up when you were an attorney?
I had a watercolor hobby and I did that. And then I ended up, I was able to get a job where I just wrote. I wrote briefs and settlement letters all the time. And I had a day or two off every week. And the City of Seattle Parks and Recreation Department hired me to teach watercolor. So I did that on my days off. And I had some great. I taught at the conservatory in Seattle. That was my one of my venues, and the Tudor Building at Montlake, and some other really just great spots. I was the watercolor teacher at, and so yeah, that was my creative thing. And so also, what one thing I just opened in this last fall. This last Labor Day was the grand opening. I opened an offsite distillery tasting room with art. So basically, it's an art gallery with cocktails. But
Yeah.
the idea, and then so it's in the same building as so our son, who owned the brewery, ended up moving out to Hoodsport, and so he in the building he's in, we have the art gallery. So, and then we're building decks for people to have cocktails or beer or whatever outside, um, looking out over the canal. So it's
Yeah. Sure. Beautiful.
so yeah. And the other thing is traveling for us. One thing we would like most about traveling is meeting people. And ironically, even though it was so hard for me to start talking to people when they first came in, now it's so easy. And we meet people from all over the world. So we kind of feel like, why do we need to travel? People from all over the world come to visit us, and we can just talk to them and get to know them, and it, it's it's amazing,
So it sounds like you had a lot of things that just kind of fell into place, Jan, not because you had some grand plan, but
right?
just because the universe aligned. You got into a
Yeah,
business that has allowed you to flex this creativity in a way where
yeah,
you used to sort of bifurcate it between your stuff you went to work to do and then your stuff that you did after work to be
yeah.
creative and build things out in the world. And now that has become the work you do. So,
Yeah, I mean, our lives have just been amazingly lucky.
well, and now you're in your mid 70s. Like, what is the plan? How long are you going to do this for? How are you thinking about the future?
I don't know. I don't know. I just that's a really big question. We have enough whiskey in the barrels in the basement for if we just didn't make any more and we just sold what we're selling now to last at least another 4 years, so that we could kind of kick back and not make product, and but we'd still have to make some of our other uh, things that don't age. But we're kind of thinking about slowing down. My husband just so we were married, I don't know, 20, let's say 43 years, 44 something, I don't know. And until we owned the distillery, I always thought he was kind of the shy guy. And then he has this distillery, and he has the biggest pile of bad jokes that he tells everybody, and he just has so much fun serving his spirit. We give complimentary samples. He loves that, and he's so happy. I mean, he in the morning he gets up and he's all excited to go to work. And I just, both of us really liked the part of our lives that we were professionals, and we kind of identified with that kind of career model. It's kind of what we grew up with, what we people thought we were going to do, and that's what we did, and it's kind of what we thought we were going to do. But then, you know, I think I would, and I think I said this before, I would have been so much happier if I had just become a business owner at a much younger age. Well, and then we'd also have, if we'd done that earlier, we'd have 20-year aged whiskey. But
So interesting. So you enjoyed your jobs, but you didn't really know what you were missing, is what I'm
right,
hearing. And you
yep,
got a chance to sort of be in it. And it sounds like it's brought out parts of both of your personalities that maybe were sort of dormant in some
yes,
ways.
yep, I would say that's exactly true.
Does that make it hard to think about sort of phasing out or letting
Yeah,
go at some point?
yeah, because well, I'm thinking somehow I can keep the art gallery going because that's not nearly the amount of work. But it's really rough for my husband to think about phasing out. I mean, I don't imagine that we're going to, well, but we could. I mean, we could be in our 80s self-serving whiskey. I don't know, maybe. But once again, it's not thought out. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. And you're still young. You're in your mid 70s. You
That's
got
right.
how much longer before you got to
Yeah.
decide?
And we're lucky. Our health is good for the age we're at. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it's called reasonably good health. Yeah. So we're
Yeah, has
lucky
your
that
health
way.
always been this sort of relatively good, or do you think there's something about the business that has contributed to you being a little more happy, a little healthier?
Definitely happier. Yes, definitely that. I don't know, health wise, yeah, probably so. Because we're really active. Instead of sitting at a desk, we're running around the distillery all day. We get in a lot of steps. So, and a lot of movement, because you got to shelve things and bottle things and stir things. I mean, we're busy all day long moving. So,
Yeah.
yeah, probably it keeps keeping us younger.
Well, let's go back for a second, Jan, and talk about when you started working with the self-employment assistance program.
Hmm.
So they accept you into this, and at that point, you sort of decide you're going to commit to the path of becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I don't think I really thought it through. I think partly because of my age, I think I was thinking I was just going to have a successful hobby, a hobby that would pay for itself. I didn't, yeah, because, I was going to get my Social Security and Medicare any day, so I didn't have to have a long-term plan.
So you weren't thinking about it all that seriously from the standpoint of this has to replace X income forever. I'm
Correct.
super worried about this risk piece. It was more just what do I think would be fun and interesting to experiment with.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is we had the financial resources to buy the building and get it all. So we've never had rent or mortgage for the business, which is
Yeah,
really a big
huge.
benefit when you start a business.
Well, I'm curious, do you know what's happened with the value of that building? If you bought that in 2012 or whatever it is, I'm
Yes,
guessing
because
it's gone up quite a bit.
yes. Yeah, well, the weird thing is Hoodsport before COVID, everything was just dirt cheap. I mean, you could buy anything for a nominal fee or nominal amount. I mean, it was really cheap. So COVID hit. And ironically, at the same time, the internet company, Hood Canal Communications, built out their internet service to
The
increase internet for all the areas around Hoodsport. And so COVID hits, people leave the city and they come out and think, well, I'm going to work at home. I might as well work out in our cabin or I'll buy a cabin. And I think Hoodsport is just like a lot of other kind of beautiful locations where during COVID, people decided to leave the city and work from home. So within, oh gosh, I don't know, a very short time, less than a year, I would say all the property values like tripled. Now they've kind of gone back down to like a little bit more normal. But um, yeah, it's I would say the building's worth more than twice what we paid. At one time, right after COVID, it would have been worth three times what we paid. But now things are settling back down.
Yeah, and buying the building not only saved that cash, but it sounds like it's given you an equity opportunity that's grown
Right,
regardless of what you do with the business.
right, right.
Now, is your thought that you would ever sell the business, or is your thought just you wind it down, or gift it to your son, or what things have you
Yeah,
even talked
well, we thought one of our children might want it. I things might change. Right now, neither one's really interested in owning it. So, and I don't think we want to sell it. We fear that somebody would buy it and wouldn't put all the care into the products the way we do, um, which I think happens a lot. You'll see a really successful company sell, and then the quality of the products go down because someone is going to save some money.
about?
And we're pretty fearful that whatever legacy we have, if there is any, would be destroyed if we sold the business.
Yeah, got it. So your plan would be as you scale back, then you find ways to scale back the business.
Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Well, Jan, when you go back to thinking about it, and maybe this question isn't relevant because you talked about sort of, hey, this is just going to be a hobby, but were there any risks that stood out to you that you were thinking about as you considered going down the path of starting a company?
Mm, the only risk I guess I thought about was we used our 401k money to buy the building.
Okay.
and to start the business and to buy the stills and all the stuff we needed. Um, and if we failed, then we would not have a retirement fund.
Okay. Well, that's a big deal. So how did you think about that?
Well, my husband was more upset than me. I figured, well, we own our house free and clear. We'll be okay. We can live on our Social Security. But yeah, no, everything's turned out great. It's been very lucky.
Got it. So your thinking on that was, hey, I'm taking this risk with this money, but you felt like you had enough other assets and you had enough clarity on what your fallback plan would be that you said, yeah, it's an acceptable risk. And presumably, how much of the investment was in the real estate versus in the equipment for the business? Help us understand how much of the risk was sort of real estate based, where you had a little more stable value, versus in the business where there's a big volatility of value depending on how the business performs.
Yeah, I would say 80% was the building. So we had to, the building was in horrible shape, horrible, horrible
Got it.
shape.
A lot of renovations.
It had been empty for 2 years, and I mean, it was a disaster. So we spent as much money on repairs as we had spent on the building. So, but then
Got it.
yeah, the equipment and all that was, of the total we spent, the equipment and all that was maybe only 20%.
Got it. So most of the risk was in the real estate, and it sounds like you felt at least reasonably good that the stability for that market was going to be there. And it
Yeah,
turns out it's been maybe even better. So when you say it's worth twice as much, you mean including the amount that you put into in renovations?
no. Mm-mm.
No.
It's
Got it.
it's only it's like I'd say 50-70% increased in value.
Got it. Over the totality of what you had to put into it to get it to a usable
Right,
spec.
right.
All right. And you've been at this for how many years? 12 years now? 13
Yeah,
years?
yeah. Well,
Okay.
we bought the building in 2012. Yep.
Okay. So 13 years now. Uh, you bought a building and started a business at a time when most people are 2 or 3 years from thinking about retiring and starting to take their
Right.
Social Security. So why don't you tell us, what does your retirement look like? How do you even think about retirement at this point?
Well, that's a good question. Well, a couple of things. One, when we bought the distillery, we also bought an extra house up at the golf course, and it's a great rental. So I always think when I retire, I'll have that rental income. And then we bought the building that the brewery and the art gallery are in, and there's another renter in there. And I think I always thought real estate would be better to rely on than Social Security. I think the stock market scares me. The whole idea. I don't know what it is. A lot of my friends love the stock market. They've done great with the stock market, but it terrifies me. So I like real estate. I like something I can walk on and I can see and I can touch. And so um, I think I look at it as I think I think I'm not worried about my retirement.
Got it. So you have built a sort of portfolio of real estate to think about the how you pay for everything as you continue to live out your years. I'm more curious how you think about retirement as a concept. You're obviously still working and still
I
working
don't think I'll
hard.
ever retire. No, I don't. I don't think it's going to happen.
And why is that?
Well, I think it's the art gallery. I'll always have that. I have a lot of friends who are artists, and they're and local artists, and they're all in the art gallery. And it's just fun to own the art gallery, and think up fun things to do. Um, fun events, fun classes.
Is that kind of created a purpose for you of keeping this community of people that you know and love together?
Sort of, yeah, yeah. And I have to say, coming out here, I was kind of worried about moving to a new place. How would at my age, how would I make new friends? And it's been really easy, especially through my art.
Got it. I thought you were going to say, especially when I give them free whiskey.
There's that. There is that too, yes.
Well, tell us about that because that's an interesting angle to think about. Some people, when they buy a business, end up having to relocate in order to find an opportunity. So tell us about what that journey has been like for you, picking up where your life was, your community was, moving to a different place that's connected to this business, and what that process was for you.
It was really hard to sell our family home so we had we in Seattle we lived in the Wallingford neighborhood. So we were on Ashworth
Okay.
and we that's where the children grew up, and it was a really close knit neighborhood. And selling that house, which we did, we held on to it for a while because we thought, oh, if things fail, um, we need the house in Seattle to go back to. And we thought, well, if we sell it, we'll never be able to go back to Seattle. So we hung on to it for a long time. And that was really, really hard to leave Seattle. That way, the neighborhood was a good neighborhood. But the odd thing about owning a business and I really like this part a lot, is that people that you know in your past come and visit. You know, that if you just lived like in Seattle and somebody was passing through and they had a few extra minutes and they were in the neighborhood, they probably, when I was young, when I was like 20 or, in college, everyone would always just drop in on everybody. You'd never called ahead, you just dropped in. And that, to me, is a sad thing about or the way the world is today. We don't just pop in and visit somebody. And even we don't even sometimes not even do pop in phone calls. Sometimes, we set a time for a phone call. And I just find all that weird. But the beauty of owning a business is people feel completely free to pop in. So we get people from that we've known and haven't seen for like years and years and years, like from the 80s. And they'll somehow know that we have this distillery and they will pop in, and it, it's just so fun. And, at first we don't recognize them and they'll say, hey, oh yeah, hi. Oh, it's so great to see. And they'll visit for a while. And then we get and then sometimes old friends will stop, like my husband's old water polo team, members of that they'll come by a lot. And then one time, one guy came in and I kept thinking he looked really familiar. He didn't know we owned it. And then finally, I figured out who he was. And, it's just, and then he ended up coming over for dinner. And it's just I like it better so my generation, we didn't have Facebook. And, we just we kind of lost track of each other, except people that you really stayed in touch with, which, is hard. You had to pay long distance charges for phone calls or you send a letter, but that wasn't the same as seeing people. But if you own a business, my goodness, they just pop in and you see people from all different parts of my life have popped in. And it is so much fun.
Okay, Jan, who was the random guy that showed up that you figured out who he was?
That was
Boyfriend?
Ed. No, it's an old, it's just yeah. I haven't had any random boyfriends pop up, but
No, so Ed, just an old friend from many, many years ago.
my husband's old friend, actually. And
Right
so
on.
when I figured it out, it took him a while to figure it out. And I said, oh, let's call Chuck and have him come and see if he knows. And Chuck walked in and he said, oh, hi, Ed. He knew him right away. So that is biggest surprise.
Right on. So it's created a place where old friends can come visit. What about sort of getting integrated into that new community?
Yeah. Well, I joined some things like Kiwanis and Nori. And so, you meet a lot of people that way. So, and then the business owners we chat with a lot. It's, um, yeah, I really like the new community. It's good.
So the business has given you part of that connection into the community, right? Like a reason to talk to people and a vehicle to do
Yes.
it through,
Yeah.
as opposed to just most people maybe who move to a place like Hoodsport and they might see someone at the grocery store, but there's no reason they might interact with them. And you're doing that every day with people that
Yeah.
walk in.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. We have a lot of regular customers that, you know, we see every month. They'll stop in and
Got
they're,
it.
yeah.
And so now you've got the art gallery. That's your next project that you're sort of getting off the ground. What's next after that, Jan? What happens when you get bored with that project and you need something else to keep your mind busy?
Yeah, well, my husband says don't show her brain surgery. She'll go after that next. I don't know.
So there's nothing in the queue, nothing you're thinking about in the back of your head about what might be fun to do next.
Well, I actually, yes, there is.
I figured.
So my friend and I started this. Oh, I should have sent you this picture. We started a festival called Fjord and Krossen. So
Okay.
we make aquavits, which are Scandinavian spirits, and there's a famous aquavit called Linja out of, and I might be pronouncing it incorrectly, from it's um, distilled in Norway and then shipped across. Well, like in 1806, they sent a shipment of aquavit, I think, to India or someplace like that. Anyway, it got rejected, went back, and then as a result of the aquavit being in these barrels on the ship and the motion and everything, they got it back and thought it was the best aquavit ever. So they still ship the aquavit still takes a trip on a ship across the line, the equator, and that's why it's called linea, and back. And so I thought, well, I'll just, my poor husband, he's so nice to me to put up with all my ideas. I said, well, Chuck, I'll put you in we'll get a little barrel down to the dock. The dock's just like a couple buildings away. We'll get down to the dock and you can get in a rowboat and row out across the Hood Canal and back. And that'll be the line you cross, the middle of the canal. So he said, I can't do that. So I had a friend who wanted to do a water. She does events anyway. She wanted to do a hood, like a canal, paddling kind of event, on the water. So we combined it, and we found a boat to take the aquavit out, and it's actually quite a in our little part of the world. It's a popular little festival. So we have a tiny sidewalk parade from the distillery down to the dock, and then we have vendors and things on the grounds of the Hoodsport dock area. We have under the dock, we have an aquavit grotto, so we plan our festival every year around the tide because they come the t- the tide goes out and we quickly set up everything, and then including the grotto, our over 21 grotto, and then people can sit there and drink and watch the race or whatever. And then the tide comes back in at 3 o'clock. And so
So you got
if
limited
they
limited
don't
time.
leave, they're going to float away. Their tables and chairs and them are just going to float out. So yeah, it's a really fun festival. And we last year we had 104 boaters in there in kayaks and canoes. So what they do, we have this big sailboat. We take the barrel, put it on the sailboat, and it goes out into the canal about halfway. And then all the little boats go out, and depending on how things work out there, sometimes they go around a buoy, sometimes they go around the boat. They race, and then they come back. It's a little timed race, and so and
And now you
people
have an
really like
excuse to consume some
it.
more calories of alcohol because they just did a little
Yeah.
workout.
Well, and then up top, so we have vendors and we have oysters and all that kind of stuff. And there's not the festival only lasts from 11 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. It's only a 4-hour festival, so but
Yeah.
it's really unique and different. And
Yeah,
we
it sounds
call
like
it kind of like the Swedish chef, Fjord and Krossen.
and it sounds like such a cool way that you have created and inserted a little bit of yourself into this community that you've moved into, your business, some of the history, and now you've got another thing to drink at your distillery that has a story to it.
Yep, yep, yep.
To tell everybody that comes in. Well, I'm curious, Jan. You've been at this for 12 or 13 years now. You say you've gotten lucky. I'm curious when people come to you and say they're considering or thinking about starting a business, what do you tell them? What advice do you give them?
Well, no one ever asks me just in general. They only ask about starting a distillery.
Okay.
And I tell them I think location is everything. So in the distillery world, a lot of people choose, it's easy to get all the permitting if you're out in some industrial area to manufacture the booze. But then who comes to your tasting room? And we if you sell directly, at least in Washington State, we can sell directly to consumers in our tasting room. If I do that, and with the free, I lose about 6% in the samples I give away.
Okay.
Whenever I sell like to Total Wine or we sell one of our aquavits at Canlis, always we lose 30%. Always. That's just kind of standard. If we had a distributor, we would lose 60 to 70%. In the business, I don't know that much about business, but I do know this is really easy math here.
Yep.
You want a place where people can stop in and you don't have to make as much. And it's just Chuck and me, so we can't make that much. So we have to really make certain what our margins are to make it work. So I
Okay.
always tell them location, location, location. You want a good spot for your tasting room.
Okay, you sort of dropped something in here that I want to stop for a second for our listeners. You just dropped it, when we sell it to Canlis. Canlis happens to be maybe the nicest fine dining restaurant in all of Seattle. So tell us the story of how Canlis even came to know who you were and to stock your particular aquavit liqueur in their dining room.
Well, it's through my art. So I teach, well, actually through my son. So my son owned a brewery, and one of his employees liked my artwork and decided she wanted to come to my watercolor class. So she'd drive all the way out to Hoodsport to join us. And then she decided when she got married, she wanted to be married in Hoodsport. And it was so nice. She she stayed at my house the night before the wedding. And it was really charming. The whole thing was charming. Then she ended up working at Canlis and she got us in there. So it was just kind of through my art, I guess you could say, and through my family.
Through your art and through your family. Um, have you been to Canlis since you have moved to Hoodsport?
Well, we could never, of course, we never could afford to go there. But when I delivered, she was there, and the bar manager, Jose, was there, and they showed me around, and it's very impressive. Yeah. And we have an invitation to come try our cocktail.
Yeah, and so did they choose the aquavit because that had such a unique story that allowed them to tell sort of this local distillery and how it was created?
Well, we have four different aquavits, and they just chose one that made a really nice cocktail.
Got it. Love it. Um, anything to share with us about, you started, it sounds like consumer direct, right? People were coming in and tasting.
Right,
How and when
right.
did you decide to start selling wholesale either to restaurants or to locations like Total Wine?
Yeah, well, we do. Well, Total Wine, I just applied, and then some of the rest. So we're at Off Alley. I don't know if you've heard of them in Seattle. They're really cool restaurant. And and then at school, basically we sell to people we really like, and because we self-distribute, so we need to have a relationship where they can call us up and we can figure out the best day to deliver, and people we enjoy delivering to, because usually when you drop things off, you like to chat and say hi. We've had other invitations, but basically we really, really like the people we work with, and that's how we kind of choose where we're at.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like you've run this business more for what you find to be interesting and authentic to who the two of you are, not necessarily what's going to drive the highest potential dollar amount, right? I think most people who have a
Oh,
distillery would be knocking down the door of any distributor that wants to sell their product through, whichever stores.
that's 100% true. Thank you for that kind observation. Yeah, I mean, our products, we make everything from scratch, and it's everything's very high quality. And so you as a distiller, we get these advertisements all the time from these companies that have these giant stills like in Iowa or Illinois or Indiana. Giant, they're like the size of a house, really, and they're outside in a field, and and it's like a hose. Spirits come off, and then they can age them in large barrels or just so you can buy on the open market. You can buy aged whiskey. You can buy anything you want, and then you bring it back to your distillery and put it in your own bottle. And if you buy like the vodka, you can, and it's a lot of it's like they call it pharmaceutical grade. It's very pure, and so like making aquavit, a lot of distillers just bring that. They buy it on the open market, and then they bring it back to their distillery, and then just redistill it, or maybe just put it in jars or something with whatever spices they want. They might macerate. They might actually redistill it. They might do a lot of different things. We like for our aquavits, it's all made from pears, so we ferment pear and then we distill it, and then so it gets distilled so many times. We have a big copper pot still that makes everything taste better because the copper absorbs a lot of the bad. So my husband spends a lot of time cleaning that still. I mean, a lot of time cleaning. And then we put it in a column still to get it up to the ABV that we need to make it a vodka. And then we put it back in another little tiny pot still with the spices and distill it again. And so everything gets distilled a lot, and it's all really good Washington State pear concentrate.
You learn something new every day. So I had no idea aquavit was made from a pear. So it's a vodka.
No,
It's the
nobody else does it that way. No,
vodka
no.
made from a pear.
Yeah, generally it's made from grain. I don't know if anybody else makes it from pears, but we do. And same thing like our gins are really different. We make one gin from pears and cranberries, which was just kind of a weird thing. Once when we picked up our pears, they gave us some cranberries by accident. So we thought, oh, well, we'll try that. And then that pretty much became our mash bill for that. And then because we're out on the canal, we have a project with Hama Hama Oyster Company. Do you know them?
No?
Oh, well, you could look them up. They have a big oyster farm and a lot of fun activities there. And we take our barley there and smoke it in their oyster smoker.
So, Jan, one last question for you because I want to take up all your day here. Have you started putting any of your art on any of your bottles?
Yes, all the way. Yeah, that's a little vanity. Yeah, that's a problem with me being vain there. Yes, I do.
Why is that a problem? That is 100% what makes what you do interesting and unique is that you've infused, pun intended, this part of who you are into what you're distilling for people.
Yeah. Well, I do have my art on my. I have some photos from. I was going to start out with old photos, kind of the area, because we're in this old hardware store. And I did that for a few labels, and then I just decided to put the artwork on.
Got it. So that is the primary background for your labels are different
Yeah.
pieces of artwork that you've done.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, Jan, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. You have such a unique story. Um, a lot of people wonder if 40 is too late, but for you, 62 wasn't even too late. You're laughing at that because you're like, you got so much time.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
but it sounds like you've created a life in retirement that looks very different than maybe what it is for most people, but in many ways nourishes who you are and supports the community you live in a really cool way.
Thanks. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't want to brag, but yeah, thank you. I think you're right.
Well, Jan, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate your time and wish you the best of luck as you figure
Okay.
out how the next stages of this are for you and your community.
Thank you. Thanks for the interview.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.